Hey, everybody. Today, we're looking forward to giving you the insider on today's current conversations in real estate, expert perspectives, and firsthand accounts from us about our clients' current realities as we tackle the Toronto real estate market's big questions. Interest rates are rising, investors are grappling with cash flow, and rental incomes are feeling the squeeze. It may feel like a roller coaster ride, but remember, every crest and trough in the real estate market comes with opportunities. The question is, how do we identify them? Is now the time to buy, sell, or rent? The path ahead may seem obscured by known unknowns, but with boots on the ground, we're dedicated to shining a light on those shadows. Whether you're a veteran investor stepping onto the property ladder for the first time or navigating the rental landscape, we share our current opinion on today's real estate climate. In this episode, we'll discuss conversations we're actively having with clients today. Stories from those making property moves due to life's changes, finding that perfect school district for their children, accommodating a growing family, blending households, or even managing an estate sale. Through those conversations, we'll explore the challenges, the triumphs, and the unique opportunities these changes can present. It's the second week of July in 2023. We are Foxmeyer & Associates, today's most innovative and active brokerage in central and downtown Toronto. We aren't here to regurgitate boring stats. You can find those anywhere. We're here to share what we see going on in the Toronto real estate market in real time on a weekly basis so that you can be in the know and make informed decisions. If you're interested in getting an up-to-the-moment opinion on what's happening in Toronto real estate right now and learning what's going down boots on the ground before it becomes a stat, then you're in the right place. My name is Ian Busher, and I'm a broker with the FM team. Keep her number handy. This is Corey Marin, in-house hype girl and resident expert listing broker. And of course, a good man to know, Mr. Ralph Fox, our analytical, investor-driven macro picture watcher. We do this every week, so hit that subscribe button and join us for the latest updates every 7 days. So now, let's get into today's agenda. We'll examine 5 key questions: selling a tenanted property, the financial viability of holding on to or selling non-cash flowing properties, buying before selling, the classic rent or buy debate, and making real estate decisions and significant life changes. Corey?
Well, I'm very much looking forward to the topic today. It's great to see you both.
Thank you.
Feels
Likewise.
like it's a long time since I've seen you, even though I know it was like 2 days ago, but it does feel like a long time. Very much looking forward to breaking down these categories. And as we were brainstorming what topic we wanted to cover, we really noticed that we were having very repetitive conversations with our clients. And I don't mean repetitive in a negative way, but in a thematic way. And they seem to be trends that we're repeating week over week, especially over the last 4 to 6 weeks. And the whole point of this podcast is for our listeners to get information that's happening in real time, not recycled information that you can find anywhere. And we want to share some of the insights, some of the concerns, some of the problem solving that we're doing on these various themes, so that we can hopefully educate our viewership, give people some peace of mind, give people some ideas, and then basically act as in-house advisors with you actually having to pick the phone and call us. So I hope some of the experiences that we're having with our clients will help our viewership today. I think you're going to see a lot of unique perspective about what's happening, boots on the ground. So thank you so much for joining. I think let's dive right in and let's go over like these big 5. So I think the big one that we've been having, especially over the course of the last 2 or 3 weeks, have been with clients that are panicking. And they're panicking and calling and being like, I need to talk to you guys today. I want to sell my condo. And we're like, what? Your tenanted condo, the one that you've been holding for the last 5-6 years? So theme number 1, clients panicking. They want to sell their property that is tenanted. This is probably the biggest discussion we've been having. So Ralph, why don't you start giving our viewers a little idea about what that looks like? And then Ian and myself will add in some color about that too. And then we'll go on to theme number 2. Ralph,
so
take
Corey,
it away.
Just to clarify, is the question about selling tenanted units, or is it about whether a client should sell somebody should sell or not sell in this climate?
They go hand in hand, I would say.
Okay.
But this one's specifically about conversations we're having with people who want to sell their tenanted property. So why do they want to sell their tenanted property out of nowhere? And if they can sell it for whatever reason, why do they want to sell it? And is the right time to sell it? And how easy is it to sell a property that's tenanted?
Got it. Thank you for clarifying.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think there's a couple aspects to this question. The first one is, and we get asked this a fair amount on the regular, somebody has decided to sell and they want to just put their condo on the market. It's an investment property. Biff, bang, boom, it's tenanted. Let's get it on the market. We should have it sold, right? And we'll be able to get rid of the tenant. I think that's the first part of the conversation, which is something we have frequently. But in this climate where interest rates and we have investors on variables,
including us.
Including us, feeling the squeeze, it's leading to us having these conversations more and more and more over the last few weeks. So we've definitely seen an uptick in this type of question. And the real thing to understand, and it's the first thing that we remind all of our clients, investor clients, is that you don't have the rights as a landlord that you think you have. And that as a landlord, you cannot just evict a tenant or tell a tenant they have to leave within any time frame because you want to put your property on the market. Those tenants are there, and the only thing that's going to change their mind from leaving is some type of an agreement made between the landlord and the tenant, because the tenant doesn't have to go anywhere. Ian?
Ralph, just while you're on that point too, I can't stress this enough for anybody watching this that doesn't really understand the Landlord and Tenant Act. If you have any questions before you do something that might be shooting yourself in the foot, please call us and we will try to help you with it. And if we can't help you with it, we will point you in the direction of people who can. But do not reach out to your tenant unless you fully understand what the tenant's rights are, what your own rights are. Because we've seen that recently. I just want to point that out, that people say, I did this stupid thing. Now, how do I get out of it?
Yes.
Yeah. And we have seen an uptick in those calls as well.
Yeah.
Where we're trying to unwind situations that have gotten off on the right foot. And as I've told clients the wrong foot. And as I've told clients before, and as we have advised them, is whenever you're starting a negotiation, the first couple steps of communication will set the entire tone. And so it's really important that you get off on the right foot day one, because if a tenant gets their back up against the wall, they're calling the rent tribunal, the landlord tribunal board, they're talking to friends, they get all fired up, and all of a sudden you've got a heated problem. So taking a step back here, if you're looking at selling a property, actually any property, the ultimate way to sell the property is to sell it vacant and staged. And whether you're a landlord or a homeowner, that doesn't change. Vacant and staged is always going to be the best way, because your property will show its best, and because you'll have buyers will have, and their agents will have immediate access to your property. And those first couple of weeks when you're on the market, no matter what the property type, are super critical to a successful sale. And so you want to, talking about starting off on the right foot, you want to hit the market at your property's highest and best. And as we all know, most tenants don't take the best care of their homes, and they don't necessarily have the best furniture, and they certainly don't allow for showing 24/7. And in most instances, they can create an incumbents for agents and buyers even getting access to the property, let alone seeing it and not walking in the door and seeing a tenant, with their feet up on the coffee table watching.
Or in their Superman underwear, which I have seen.
I've seen it too.
And in the Superman underwear?
Yeah, I think that was me actually.
And I would just like to add that, when acting for buyers and looking at properties and seeing in the occupancy section of a listing that the property is tenanted, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just skip showing this one, knowing that it's going to be so much more challenging to get the appointment that I want, get the time I want, and then let alone acquire the property and then get it vacant, which is a whole other part of this whole conversation. So just that alone, just that marketing piece of it saying tenanted, I'm like, forget it. Let's just look for something else. So already you've lost some of your buyer pool.
And you have to understand, as a buyer, you take on potential liability if you're buying a tenanted property, because there have been instances where the tenant just decides, even though they've been given proper notice to vacate, that they're not leaving. And it's a year to a year and a half to get a hearing at the landlord and tribunal board. So even if you're in the right, it doesn't matter because justice does not move quickly if you're a landlord or a buyer. So it's a real issue because a lot of agents and a lot of buyers tend not to want to offer on tenanted properties because of that very reason, because you are assuming a whole bunch of risks and known unknowns because you have no existing relationship with this tenant. And it's one of the things I'll say all the time is in most instances, tenants are very reasonable and there's some way to create a great win-win situation for all parties, as long as it's approached from that standpoint. However, there are circumstances, like with anything in life, where you don't necessarily have a great tenant, or for some reason they are angry at the world or the landlord, and they dig their heels in because they know they can, and they start to create problems. And so that's why in the situation of a landlord, you have to have real pause, as you do as a buyer looking at offering on a property or even considering going to see a property that's tenanted.
So just to recap here, because I just want our viewers to totally understand this. Most sellers that have tenanted properties, I would say like at least 80% of them think that because they want to sell the property that they can evict the tenant. So that is a falsehood. Just to repeat that. The second major point here is if you do want to approach a tenant about possibly selling, please, please, please reach out to us or a very tenured real estate broker or team about how to approach this before you do anything. Get educated first, so don't make any fast moves. And the third thing I just want to add more clarity about is having these dialogues with the tenant and then potentially creating the win-win to get them out of there. What exactly does that look like? And does there need to be documentation? And what is the protocol there, Ralph, about that? Just so that we're really clear about setting the owners up for success.
For sure. And the tenant as well, because it's a way that all parties can win. So as already stated, the best way to market and sell a property is to have it in vacant and staged. And that is the approach that the landlord should be taking, knowing, as discussed as well, that the tenant has all the rights and not you as the landlord. And so even if a tenant first year or year has expired on a lease and they've rolled into month to month, the same rules still apply. And so as a landlord, and I've probably had this conversation as a landlord myself and as a real estate broker on behalf of our investor clients with tenants. And essentially what you say to them is you say, and typically the way I'll do it is we'll send a note saying, listen, the sellers or myself or whoever is considering selling the property, I don't want to shock you just by calling you, up and saying, listen, we want to upend your life and sell your home. But this is what we're looking at doing. So I'm wondering in the next few days if you have time to jump on a call. So that way they're not feeling ambushed. And you've written the email or you've opened the communication in a very transparent manner. And so when you start to speak to them, they'll have had some time to digest that information. And if there's a half decent relationship existing between the landlord and tenant already, then you're really setting yourself up for success. And then the basic tenure or tone of this type of conversation when you actually meet or speak to the tenant is you say, listen, for a whole host of reasons these days, it's more financial. The sellers have a variable and there's a whole bunch of financial pressures that are going on with inflation and everything else. And they're in a position where they need to sell. So the first thing is do you have or any interest or the ability to actually buy the property? Because
first right of refusal.
Yeah, that would be amazing if we could work something out. And then secondarily to that, if they need time to think about it or it's a definite no, then when you resume that conversation, the tone basically is like, listen, we're going to be putting the property on the market. There's some flexibility on timing. We can put it on the market by law and just have 24 hours notice, and other agents will have access to the property. Given the way the market is running right now, it's probably going to be an end user who ultimately purchases the property. And so at the end of the day, 60, 90 days from now, you're probably going to get evicted because things are selling and this is a great condo or this is a great property, and it most likely will sell. And in the interim, you are going to have a lot of interruptions to your life because people are going to be coming in to see the property. And it's a real disruption that, if it's avoidable, it might be best for you. Now, from the landlord or my position, is the highest and best way to sell the property is, as discussed, vacant and staged. And so maybe there's a way to work a win-win where if you were to leave and find occupancy somewhere else at a future date, then in turn, there will be some type of remuneration, which will help make the transition easy for you. And of course, the landlord or its agent would be happy to give you a great recommendation and even, help find a new place. And so typically what will happen is after they think about it, they're going to be like, well, I'm going to stay here for 30 days. There's going to be people coming in and out. Then I'm going to get served with a notice that legally I have to leave. And then I'm going to have the hassle of finding a new place. But here the landlord is letting me leave on my own timeline or within a reasonable timeline.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to write me a great letter and they're going to give me some type of financial remuneration, meaning, a month's rent and moving costs or whatever it is to help smooth over the transition to make it something more palatable for the tenant. And that's what you call, and it's really how you make any deal. And I've heard many theories about how a deal is struck and how a deal is made. But from my lens, and I think on behalf of Foxmare, and our position has always been to come from it from a win-win position and always leave something on the table for the other party. And so the best way to set that up is to come to it from that approach and say, this is what I need to get my win. How do I give you a win? And therefore we can all work together and hopefully make a beautiful win-win scenario.
Yes.
And that's typically how we approach those type of situations. Sometimes we've had to, as Ian as Ian did mention, jump in at the last minute to try and salvage something that's gone terribly wrong.
Backpedal.
Yeah,
exactly. But it's really important from the outset to go into these type of situations with that type of mindset. And then I think going back to the second part of the question is, with interest rates going up and up and up, we are seeing an increase of tenanted properties starting to come to the market. And those are becoming a little bit more challenged to sell, as discussed earlier. So it's a very interesting time right now because we're having a lot more of these conversations and we're trying to give guidance to our clients on what the best steps for them would be long-term in this situation. And long-term, our belief is the Toronto real estate market is going to do unbelievable things. And if you can hang on, hang on. But if the pressures are too great and you need that source of capital influx, then if putting your condo on the market is what you need to do to alleviate that pressure, then here are the strategies that we recommend.
So hold that thought for a second, Ralph, because I just want to close the loop on this conversation with the tenant.
Yeah.
Because I think this is really valuable for the listeners today. So totally get it. You're creating a win-win. You're having a very open dialogue. Totally makes sense to me. It's approached from a place of creating like a collaborative problem-solving solution so that you're not getting anyone's backup. No one's calling the landlord and tenant board. No one's searching, calling their paralegal about their rights. Now, let's say you come to verbal terms here. You've come to verbal terms and the landlord has agreed to pay for 1 month's rent plus moving costs and a move out date, I'm just making this up, of September 15th. Then there is a document that should be signed to end the tenancy, which is the N11 form. You can get this from the landlord and tenant board, or you can just search it in Google and you'll find the PDF there. And in that document, you want the tenant and the owners on title to sign the agreement to end the tenancy. And then any additional language that you or terms that you've agreed to, including remuneration, could be outlined on that document or attached to the document. You want everyone to sign it and initial it. And landlords out there, if you do agree to some sort of remuneration after the tenant has moved out, please ensure that you don't pay that remuneration until they actually have vacated the property and you've inspected it. So let's just use September 15th as an example. They move out September 15th. You go there the evening of September 15th and you see that the tenant has moved out. It's like relatively clean. They've given you the keys. You feel good about it. You got your win. They got their win. Then you can e-transfer them or give them a check if anyone uses those these days.
Bring a bank draft.
Yeah, or bank draft.
So they know it's certified funds. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is some protocol there, and you just want to make sure that you're keeping as much of this documented. If you have any calls with your tenant, just write a few notes about it, perhaps like in a little online note section on your laptop or what have you, or in your phone. So there is a way to do all of this, so it's formalized and very clear, so that everyone knows exactly what's happening on what date and how much money is going to transfer hands. So I think that's a really helpful thing. Anything else we want to just close the loop on selling the tenant property in terms of the logistics or any other additional advice about that? I do think that the landlord and tenant board is an amazing resource for anyone who wants to just have an additional conversation beyond their realtor or anyone else involved. They often have some really good tips. And we also know an excellent paralegal.
Yes.
If you're in a very strange situation and we just had conversations with people who have a property that's tenanted and then the tenant subletted the property. So now it's like almost double tenanted and they want to sell. I'm like, oh, so this is actually 2 agreements to end tenancy versus 1 to get it vacant and staged to sell. So there's
but
various
the landlords never even consented to the sublet.
Yep.
And they didn't have a formal lease with the tenant.
Yeah.
So the layers are adding up. But these type of situations are definitely out there for sure.
Anything else about just this specific scenario, the conversation that we're having with clients about selling tenant properties? Ian?
Just quickly, I wanted to reinforce what Ralph said, that tenants are human beings and like to be treated with respect and compassion and empathy for the situation. So I also have had to do this a lot recently, and I find that treating them with respect is huge. And starting out that way is huge too. They're not second-class citizens. So that's the right approach. Ralph, I wanted to circle back on something that you said to get the flip side of it. You said the buyer is likely to be an end user. For anybody who's a total newbie, could you touch on why that is?
Well, again, it comes back to the interest rate climate right now, where it's very hard to find properties that cash flow with interest rates currently where they're at, in spite of the fact that we've seen such a tremendous hike in rents. It's just not a climate right now where you see tons of investors looking to sweep up condos or investment properties. So usually when you're in a situation where you're selling a residential property, it's end users, meaning the people that are moving into it, the ones that are most apt to pay top dollar for the property. And it is relevant because after a buyer has bought a property, they have to disclose whether they are an investor or an end user, meaning their intent is to live in the property. And if their intent is to live in the property, then they have the right to ask the seller on their behalf to send in an eviction notice to the tenant saying the property has been sold, it's to be delivered vacant upon possession, and it's to be done so because the purchaser is an end user going to live in it. However, if the purchaser is an investor, by law, they have to assume that tenant. They cannot evict that tenant for any reason. So that's another reason why it's relevant who the potential end buyer is going to be. And in most likelihoods in this climate, it's going to be an end user looking to have vacant possession of the property, both with intent and by right.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted that
That
to
was
be
a great question. Thank you.
clarified for anybody who might be a bit more of a newbie. Sometimes we take for granted what we know because we're in this business.
And I think there's another part of this, which I think is a really interesting twist, is a lot of landlords know that they're like, well, if I permit a direct family member to move in here, that means then I can sell my property. And I'm like, no, you can evict your tenant for a direct family member to move in. This is correct information. As long as the tenant has been there for their 1 full year term and they're on a month to month. So after their full year term, you can give notice to your tenant. The direct family member is going to move in. However, you can't just turn around and sell the property 1 month later because your sister is living there or your auntie is living there, because that family member also has to live there for 1 full year before you can list the property on MLS, because you may or may not be flagged for violating the original tenant's rights and could be subject to fines up to $50,000 for that little workaround that you thought you were being really creative with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something else, landlords out there. You cannot just do that and think it will be an easy breezy thing. And people and tenants, they'll watch. So don't do that. 50,000 is just not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And the stress and the hassle.
Oh my God, no. So that's the last thing I wanted to add to that too. Okay.
Awesome.
So we talked about that one conversation. We've been having that conversation a lot and we're getting very well versed in it. So great job, team, because we're all like, oh, we've had this conversation at least once a day. Now, we have some of our clients, and we briefly touched on this. Let's dive a little bit deeper, that are like, oh my God, I want to sell because I'm not cash flowing every single month. I'm out $400 a month. I want to sell. Does this make sense for landlords to consider selling when they're not cash flowing month over month? Talk to me about that.
Well, the first thing, that we say, and the first thing that I think about myself is the long term.
You too.
And I think you have to remember the reasons why you bought the investment property in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And has anything intrinsically changed with that thesis?
Nope.
And if you understand the fundamentals and you look at how challenged we are with supply and how continually challenged we are with housing starts at all-time lows, with 1/3 of pre-construction condos and new homes being canceled. You look at that construction costs skyrocketing, replacement costs skyrocketing, taxes, development charges skyrocketing, land costs remaining very strong, input costs in the face of massive immigration and the largest transference in history of wealth from the boomers to the Generation Xers and to millennials. You start to understand that the issue of supply and demand is only going to exacerbate over the next 5, 7, 10 years. And so that hasn't changed. And if you look at the resiliency of the Toronto real estate market and you look at the way it's performed, it's unbelievable. If you think about, people are like, well, when the immigration stops, then the market will collapse. Well, look what happened in 2020 when immigration stopped with COVID. The market shot up. Then people were like, okay, well,
foreign buyers.
It's interest rates, it's cheap money. That's got to be it. That's what it is. Interest rates go up 400 basis points and the market's at an all-time high in 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
So we continue.
And the foreign buyers ban and vacancy tax.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so you take all of these sort of stories out of the equation, which is what people have been said is continually propping up the market, from empty homes, foreign buyers, to immigration and to cheap money. And yet the market still continues to be incredibly resilient. And as we sit here today, almost at market peak, not quite, but pretty darn close. And so you start to realize that there are factors that are driving the market that are so deep that it's not changing. And that thesis, if you extrapolate this out over time, is only going to continue. And then you start to think about, what is going to perform better than Toronto real estate over the next 5 to 10 years? And you're not going to find a better investment. You're not going to find anything with a better historical trend line. And you're not going to find anything that really is going to be as compelling as what you have right now in front of you, which is an incredible asset in downtown Toronto, hopefully. And so you hang on and you take the loss and you write the loss off, you minimize the damage, and you wait, because interest rates are not going to remain high forever. And if it's 6 months or if it's a year, if it's a year and a half, in the grand scheme of things, where prices have the potential to be in 5 years, will make these losses look nominal.
Totally. And so the idea, I think, for our viewers out there is that the appreciation over the long term is going to outperform the short term gain. So this $400 that you're losing every month, like, okay, first of all, is that going to make any difference to your life? No. It's not like $400 is all going to be like, oh my God, now I have such a robust lifestyle because I have an extra $400 in my pocket. It's going to make zero difference to your bottom line or lifestyle. It's not like you're all of a sudden going to be able to go on vacation because you've got an extra $400. So yeah, a little bit of short-term pain. But if you think about the long term, Ralph's favorite 2 words, side by side with a hyphen in the middle. Your condo or your home may appreciate this year $100,000 or $150,000.
So there's a couple charts that I'd like to pull up here. And if you look at the first one, these are 2 that we've been sort of tracking. One was put out by economist Mike Moffat. And here on this chart for the province of Ontario, he shows last year in 2022 with immigration, an increase of 500,000 people. Now, 1 million was the growth for Canada. 50% of that happened in Ontario. And you can see there were only 33,000 apartments built, 11,000 what we consider row homes, 24,000 single detached. That is a drop in the bucket, and that is just last year alone. If you look at this next slide here, which I was produced by Daniel Foch, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, and he put this out on Twitter, which was building off of Mike Moffat's, Dr. Mike Moffat's original chart, and he worked off the premise that if the average household is 2.6 people, we would require 192,000 new homes. We delivered 71,000, showing just in 2022 in the province of Ontario, we had a shortfall of 120,000 homes. That's just last year. Think about what the next 5 years are going to look like in Ontario and in Toronto. And so you start to really have to narrow down on what your vision was and stop worrying about an article that you read in Maclean's magazine because they have been wrong about everything, or Toronto Life, and really think about what is the asset that you have going to be worth 5 years from now. And how is it performed with a 400 basis point increase in interest rates and through COVID? And how has that navigated through some of the strongest stresses you could put that asset through? And you'll start to understand that if you can just hold on, you're going to do just fine. And I have been doing this for probably close to 2 decades, including even longer as an investor. And if there's one thing I can tell you, the biggest regret I have is for the properties that we've sold. And the biggest regret I think anyone in Toronto, no, maybe even Canada, who's ever owned a property in Toronto, the biggest regret they will ever tell you that they have in their life, most likely, is the properties that they sold in Toronto.
Totally.
So, batten down the hatches, hang on, look at these graphs and think about what that means for the future of pricing in Toronto. And I think the decision will become very clear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There is one condo I can't even look at that I sold that makes me feel like crying when I drive by it. I can't even look at the building. So totally. And so what?
Corey, do you remember the townhouse that we renovated and
I
sold
don't even want to talk about that. That's just a dead memory in my mind. It's like, I can't even talk about that.
Blocking that out.
Yeah.
That one's blocked out. That one needs therapy to like get that one out of the soul. Yeah. And then we were talking about this with clients. I was like, because Ralph and I aren't cash flowing on some of our properties that are on variables. And like we're in the hole on a couple of them. And it's like, okay, so we're not going on vacation this year. You know what I mean? Like that's it. Like, okay, we're not going to go on some crazy vacation. Big deal. That's like the sacrifice. That's okay.
Corey, we can't go on safari.
Four Seasons?
Yeah.
In Tanzania this year on our private plane? What?
What private plane?
I'm just making it up.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Love this. Okay. So let's talk about the third scenario. This is common. This isn't just a conversation that we have had recently. This is one that we have all the time. So I'd love your feedback about this specific theme now based on today's conditions and what we know now. So should I buy before I sell, or should I sell before I buy? How would you navigate? Oh, Ralph, how would you navigate that?
I'd like to discuss my navigation techniques.
Talk to us.
I think the key thing strategically to know is there's one almost eternal truth in Toronto real estate.
Okay.
And then that does have a significant caveat to it.
Okay.
So the eternal truth most times
then how can it be the eternal
much
truth?
harder to buy than to sell. And so typically in Toronto, you want to buy before you sell.
Mm-hmm.
The caveat to the eternal truth of Toronto real estate is that if you're in a bit of a shifting market, or there's the potential of a market shift, in Toronto's case, due to external forces like a global pandemic or the Bank of Canada losing its mind and raising interest rates by 400 plus basis points in under a year.
With an announcement coming up.
In those type of situations, you have to take heed on the eternal truth and think about the caveat, because you never want to be in a position where you buy in one market and then you sell in another market.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened, it was really interesting because in 2022 in the spring, Corey started getting a niggle, and I started waking up in the middle of the night, and we both started to get concerned with the eternal truth. And we started to advise our clients to reverse and to sell before they buy.
I know the exact client that we're talking about.
But there's a couple actually.
But I know the exact night.
I know who you're talking about too, and so does Ian.
Yeah, we all worked with this person.
And that client did very, very well.
Yes.
There's a couple. You're right. There's
because
a few
of the niggle.
There's a
because
few
of those.
and the sleepless nights. And the people that got caught were the ones last spring, May, June, who bought when the market was high, put their property on the market when the market was getting very soft and nervous. We had 100 basis point rise in interest rates last June. And those people got really burned because they were put in a position where they had to sell because they bought, and the market had shifted so dramatically that they were selling under duress in a downward market. And that's what actually caused the biggest drop in real estate prices in Toronto, were people who were caught in that transition. And that, I cannot state that this enough, is why it is so imperative to be working with professionals who can advise you, because when these shifts happen, they happen very quickly and you can get caught and you could be put into a lot of financial duress and be forced into making not good decisions because of a bad initial decision or bad advice. And so in this environment, we're starting to see a bit of a shift, again, interest rate related, whereby we're taking pause when consulting with our clients in regards to buying and selling first. It's a little bit more individualistic, I think, because the swing is far less extreme. We're talking about 25 basis points at a time, not 100. But still, a lot of thought needs to go into every situation and every circumstance. And it's not just the typical, you should buy first. And in a lot of instances, selling first can make the best sense for a buyer who's in a position where they could sell and be comfortable knowing it could take them a few extra months to buy and have somewhere to live and have that flexibility. It's a lot more difficult if you have kids and school districts and all of those life considerations that go as well. But there's a tremendous amount of thought and strategy and evaluation and reevaluation and temperature checks that need to be made in a climate like the one that we've been in really since COVID, where things can change really quickly by external forces that then cause the market to shift really quickly or adjust. And so it's something you have to be really careful with when you're looking at making a significant transition from buying and selling or selling and buying.
Yeah, like I think every single scenario has to be customized.
Yeah.
And I think it's life circumstance related. It's obviously financially related. I think it's price point related as well. And I also think it's family related. Like there's a lot of comfort in knowing, let's say, for example, people have parents they can fall back on as an example, as a bridge, whether that's financially or as a place to live. And that can kind of change the dynamic of like what we could do here. Is this like an easy turnover sale, like a vacant condo that's like a first-time home buyer, in the $600,000 range? Can we flip this easily? Is this vacant? I feel like we could sell this pretty effortlessly based on the statistics in the building. This isn't making me nervous. Yes, we could sell this effortlessly, but oh gosh, you're buying, in that $1.4 million mark and you want to buy in South Riverdale. Shit, this is going to take you like 6 months until you can like wrap your head around competing in that market. So what does that look like? So definitely price point related. What is the asset that you need to sell? And then what is your mortgage broker telling you? So you definitely have to have big conversations with them. What does your bridge financing look like? What does that cost to you look like? How much of a down payment are you putting down? That also significantly makes a difference. So like all of these variables have to be put into play. And I definitely agree that one size does not fit all in any case. And you have to be very thoughtful about this. And you have to be even thoughtful about the idea that we can come up with one strategy and be like, I feel good about this. This is the right way to approach it. And then 2 weeks later, you might get a text from us in the middle of the night because we've had the niggle or a sleepless night. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like this is the wrong thing to be doing and not feeling good about this. We've got to flip the egg.
Yeah.
Chicken and the egg. We've got to flip it around.
We're seeing a shift. Yeah. Seeing a shift. We want to act on it. Not
feeling good about it. Yes.
Yeah.
So could not agree more, Ralph, that you have to work with people that have worked in changing markets and that have those gut instincts about this, because you can look at stats all day and that is not going to drive the right direction for you. You really need to work from that guttural place of like what feels good and what is like, and if you want to be like a risk taker, fine, like that's cool, but just know you're taking a risk when you do that. I think it's a process for sure. Ian, do you have anything else you want to add to that? Like if you are you having the same conversations, chicken or egg?
Yep. From the very beginning of this, before Ralph started his answer, I was going to say the same thing. It's a case by case. If I got a cold call from somebody I didn't know who said, should I buy or sell first? I would say that there's so many layers to that onion. I cannot answer that until we've opened up all of your life circumstances
Yes.
and consulted maybe with some external forces to say, we know what's going on in the market, but we need to know exactly what's going on with you,
Yes.
right? In order to properly advise you. So
And
it's a case by case basis.
Can I see your property first to know if it's saleable or not?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
Like that really helps.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to add in this?
Since COVID, and this is something I say a lot, since COVID, I've never seen or thought a market as big as Toronto's could change and turn so quickly on a dime. And prior to COVID, you would see the market work in like 6-month trend lines, and it was very easy to understand and get a feel for.
Predictable.
But because you have lockdowns and interest rates and strikes and work from home and like all these trends that are happening in the world affecting the market, because there are factors that are bigger than the Toronto market that are affecting it, it can really shift, and it can really shift quickly. And sentiment and perception can also change really, really quickly. And one of the advantages that we have, because we're such an active team, is we sort of have tentacles everywhere, from the rental market to investor clients to someone selling a property on our team in Leslieville and someone selling something in Etobicoke and somebody doing a buy in, Yonge and Eglinton. And we have a real temperature check that we can always talk about in the market. And I always feel bad when somebody's hired or working with an agent who doesn't know that everything in the last week and a half is on fire in Leslieville, and they're listing a property and they're not holding off on offers. So it's really, really important to have somebody representing you or a team representing you that has access to that real-time information, because it is shocking how fast things can change.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, sometimes people can get caught or pay a financial price one way or the other by not having the proper information so that they could make the best decision for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If your eyes are wide open, it makes it so much easier to move through this. And going in, okay, like this is the range that this could sell for. This is how long this is going to take me. I need this type of closing. I understand what my bridge financing is going to look like. Like all of these things, well thought out in advance, flushed out. And then you're like, okay, I'm ready to take the leap.
What do you mean there's a $20,000 mortgage penalty on breaking my mortgage a year and a half into it? No one ever told me that.
All those types of questions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's move on to our next scenario. And this is an old adage to a conversation that people have been having in almost every real estate market around the world. Should I rent or should I buy? Should I rent or should I buy today?
You have to understand, the numbers, and you have to think about it. I mean, aside from the fact that we looked at those charts and talked about supply and demand, but what you have to understand is that as an investment vehicle in a market like Toronto, the performance metrics are absolutely insane.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking to one of our clients who was thinking about selling because they were in financial duress and it was a rental property. And he was like, well, I'm getting, I think it was like 7% return in the bank. Why don't I just sell and take whatever the equity I have and put it in the bank? And I said, well, you have to understand this. So let's do a mental exercise. Let's say you bought a condo or a property. I don't know where you're going to buy a house, but let's just say you bought a property for $1 million
Mm-hmm.
in Toronto. For the last, I think, 30 years, the average return has been 10%. Let's just say it's 10%.
You mean the appreciation?
Appreciation.
Yeah.
Per year. So let's just say in year one, you went up $100,000 on paper,
Mm-hmm.
and you put 20% down. So on paying down $200,000, you had a $100,000 return. If you had $200,000 getting you 7%, which would be the equivalent, you would get $14,000 on your $200,000. Now, when you own your own principal property, the taxes that you pay on the profit are tax-free. If you're in the 50% tax bracket, in order to make $100,000, you would have to make $200,000. And if you were to make $14,000, you would have to make $28,000. So the ability to build equity in a market that is so starved for inventory and will be for at least one more generation to come, and has been stress tested the way we've seen it stress tested. If you think about the return you will get knowing that you're paying down your own mortgage on top of that versus your landlord's mortgage, because in any property, a mortgage generally is going to get paid. Either it's your landlord's mortgage or your own mortgage. So you're taking this built up equity and you're paying down your own principal and you're living in it and enjoying the space. It just seems like the greatest opportunity if you can leverage it, knowing that interest rates won't remain high forever. And as they start to come down, prices will continue to rise, maybe even at a more expedited rate. And so you'll never be able to time the market. And I wouldn't be thinking about trying to see if there's going to be a little dip. I try to figure out what makes the most sense for you and your lifestyle and what can you afford. And I would be strategic on the acquisition, but I wouldn't be hyper-focused on trying to time the market because it's nearly impossible to do.
I agree with everything you said. I think the numbers, though, might be a little bit skewed right now with the interest rates being what they are. Because you're not having a lot of mortgage principal pay down right now with interest rates being that they are. Because most of your payments are going towards your interest, not towards the principal. So
that's fine, but that was the last benefit. But it depends if you're on a fixed versus variable.
Totally.
If you're on a fixed, you are getting pay down. Whereas if you're on a variable, depending upon when you purchase, but if you purchase
and
today,
how much you put down, I get that.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't think the numbers are as cut and dry as you laid out.
Well, I think if you're getting a return, I think the returns are pretty cut and dry.
The appreciation, just different than the return.
Theoretical appreciation.
Yeah. Like if we say return, I think that's confusing because it's actually appreciation.
That's correct.
Thank you. I just want to be clear because there's a big difference between ROI versus appreciation. It doesn't make sense.
No, and there's costs to sell and then transfer taxes and all those other fun things that are attached to it.
And the HST on commission.
Exactly. That should be a whole podcast.
I know. It did come up recently. That's why I think I keep bringing it up. Okay, so I get that. And I totally agree that if you can buy, you should buy. And I think even if you start small, even if you're at like a starter studio, amazing. I don't see the benefit of renting unless the only time I would see the benefit of renting is obviously if you can't afford it. Okay, fine. That's just a given.
Yeah.
But also if you're like brand new to Toronto and you've never lived here and you need to get a sense of the city and where you want to be and you've got to like get a grounding in terms of neighborhoods and commuting times and traffic and where do your kids want to go to school and get a sense of that, then I would see that renting would make sense for a year, 6 months to a year. That makes sense to me. When it makes sense, obviously, if you're here temporarily for work, that would make sense. When else would renting make sense versus buying outside of affordability? Any other times?
Life changes, divorce.
Yeah.
Work change situations or maybe insecurity over work situations. I mean, there's a whole bunch of life factors that can play into it 100%. But I think the goal of home ownership for financial stability in a market like Toronto, while it's still maybe kind of affordable, should always be first and foremost, unless you're in some type of a transition or unless you're forced into being a renter. I mean, it's staggering. I can't get around the fact that if you want to qualify to rent a 1-bedroom, you have to be making $75,000 a year.
Crazy.
Mhm.
Like that is just shocking. And the reality, and I mean, this is the other thing is in most major cities, most people rent, and most real estate is passed down generationally, and you have classes that are just renters. And as Toronto gets more and more expensive, I mean, that really is going to be the situation here, which is really unfortunate based on what I said earlier and the stability long-term financially it could provide. And that's why maybe looking at things like pre-construction or other avenues to try and acquire property is a really worthy goal, because at the end of the day, and this is something we say often, you will never be able to outsave the Toronto real estate market. And so it's really important in an environment like this to own hard assets that are sought after. And Toronto real estate has that utility to it that very few other investments that you'll ever make will have. And so if you're renting today for various circumstances, that's totally understandable. But we really would suggest to you that long term, the idea of home ownership or investment in Toronto would be probably one of the best goals you could ever set for yourselves, and put yourself on that path.
Yes. And it's exceptionally empowering as well to own real estate beyond just the financial means. So a couple things for our viewers is underneath this video, I'm going to post a couple of videos about this. One is the down payment requirements. It's a really helpful video. I'm going to put that down below. I'm going to put a video down about me buying my first condo that I ever purchased and how I did it. And it's hilarious. And it was really hard work. And it was this crazy story. So I'll post that below for some motivation. And then I'll also post our video about buying pre-construction for those of you who just want to wrap your head around that as an asset, because I think it's a really, really, really amazing way to get your boots on the ground in the market, to get your feet wet in real estate, especially if you don't have the full 20% available. It's an amazing way to start acquiring real estate assets over time. So we'll put that video as a resource for you too. And then of course, if you have questions about those videos specifically, please post them, because we're like very, very happy to talk about, those first steps about getting into the market, because it's really freaking intimidating at the onset. And you think, oh my God, there's no way I'll ever buy anything, but there's a possibility to do it with a little bit of strategy and elbow grease. So we want to make sure that you have the tools to do that. So definitely check out the resources below. Okay. Last theme about conversations we're having in real estate right now is clients that are making big life moves. And we've had lots of conversations with people moving for various different reasons. And I think it'd be interesting to our audience just to talk about what those look like and the types of shifts people are trying to make based on life changes. I'm sure we all have some anecdotes about clients making these shifts right now. So Ralph, I'll toss it to you, and then Ian, and then I'll pop in if I have any other thoughts about this. But I think this is really interesting because even in a changing market, people still need to buy and sell. And so these are some of the reasons as to why. Mr. Fox.
There's an old expression, life happens. And
oh, that expression.
Yeah. It's life or something, another word that's for it. Yeah. But they I think they can work one or the other. Residential real estate is such an impersonal, emotional, lifestyle asset that there are so many things that are non-financial that can affect it. And life happens and life changes happen. And we have seen it all over the last 6 months at a time where transactions have been at an all-time low.
Yep.
So in this climate, we've seen 20, 30-year lows in inventory levels, in transactions. And the reason is because people are essentially hunkering down. Nobody ever wants to sell their Toronto real estate. But yet there are situations where people need to for life changes. So we've seen estate sales. We've seen divorces, separations. We've seen situations where you have a couple and they have two different properties and they need to amalgamate under one roof.
A blended family.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen situations where people want to change school districts. We've seen situations where families have outgrown homes and need bigger homes or want a backyard. We've seen situations basically where people's life circumstances have dramatically taken some type of a turn and they need to move their investment from one type of a property into another type of property, and they need to change their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get those phone calls, and sometimes we know somebody's pregnant before anybody in the family knows.
We do.
Yeah.
And so we're always in on these type of major life changes, oftentimes well before besties and other family members are brought into these conversations. So life happens. Real estate falls right underneath life happening. And even in a situation where we have 20, 30-year lows in transactions and in inventory, people still need to get on with their lives. And we are very much a part of that. And it's really interesting. It's one of the more interesting aspects of our business and what we do and helping people make these massive life transitions.
Totally. I also want to add another life scenario in there. We've seen quite a few people moving into properties where they need to have a suite for their in-law.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they've lost a mother or father. And so one of their parent is now a widow. And they want their mom or dad to come live with them, but they want to have a self-contained unit for their mom or dad, which is like adorable. And that is something else that we've been dealing with probably for the first time more frequently. And it probably has to do with the fact, and I hate to say it, boys, but as we get older, so are our clients, which means our clients' parents are getting older, which means that's why we're seeing this more as well. So we've definitely been exposed to that. I'm trying to think of other scenarios, but I think
there's
go
work
ahead.
from home. People need more space to work from home, or you have a couple and now they're both full-time working from home and they can hear each other's voices and they want to kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, having lived through that myself, I don't know about you, Corey.
I have lived with that. Somebody who doesn't like to use headphones when they're working.
I find it cumbersome. I don't like stuff in my ears.
Subtle. Corey.
Yeah.
Subtle.
Like where I have to hear the other person on the phone too on speaker, like that scenario, you mean? I'm like, and then you report back and tell me what happened, even though I heard the whole conversation.
Well, you're texting me while I'm having that conversation, but that's a whole other story.
That scenario.
And you also, those are you have people moving outside the city
not
or
as much,
leaving
though.
the city.
Not as much.
No, now we're having a lot more people coming back into the city.
Yeah. We're also having a lot of downsizer conversations. Like, so I did an open house yesterday at this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful loft that we listed.
Or right sizing, as they like to put it.
Yes, right sizing. And it was this gorgeous loft. It's on the East End in Greektown. I was surprised at how many people were coming to see it as being a potential loft to live in. Moving from their principal residence that they've been living in for 30 years and being like, my dream's always been to live in a loft. And I was like, I just didn't really expect this to be, where the interest was coming from. Not everybody, but there was definitely interest from that as well. So yeah, and it is really creative and fun to be part of people's life changes and then to be able to think about how to make all of this work, because everything we discussed, about buying or selling comes into play, but it's almost amplified because you're dealing with the logistics of life on top of the financials. Yeah. So you're dealing with kids have to be in their new schools for September, or they don't want their kids to be out of their school district because they want them to have the same, a specific teacher, or they want them to have their friends that they had last year. Or, how do you make a blended family? Whose property do you sell first? Who moves in with whom? Does that person want to live in that person's house? Do you go East End or West End? It is kind of an emotional problem solving that we're doing here, as well as figuring out the numbers. And I love the fact that our clients feel like they can trust us and tell us this stuff because they know that it is going to be part of the decision making, and that they feel like they can be as transparent about it, because it's impossible to help unless we have all these
That's right.
juicy
It's
details.
the Jerry Maguire, help me help you, right? If I don't know why we're doing this, then I can't help you do it.
Exactly. This is as close as we get to reality TV when it comes to real estate in Toronto. And we have seen some drama, mostly around the divorces, I would say, is where this is the most heightened drama that we've seen. A couple screaming matches, maybe some crying people, but most of the time, everyone's pretty good. Ian, would you like to take us home?
Yes, I would, Corey. Thank you. Today, we've covered some weighty topics, from the challenges of selling tenanted properties to the financial implications of holding non-cash flowing assets and the decision-making process in the face of life's significant changes. Remember, whether you're an experienced investor, a first-time buyer, or navigating the rental landscape, the answers lie in having the right conversations and getting your boots on the ground. We'll continue to shine a light on the paths obscured by known unknowns and support you in identifying the opportunities in every crest and trough of the market. Thank you for joining us today. Stay tuned for more expert perspectives and firsthand accounts as we continue to tackle the big questions in the Toronto real estate market. Until next time, Corey, what do you like to remind our viewers?
I'd like to remind our viewers to contact us because we're super nice and we know what we're doing.
It's so true. So true. And Ralph, what should the viewers do now?
Well, obviously it's up to them, but we would graciously
We'd love it.
Appreciate it if they smash that subscribe button down below. And if they felt so inclined to hit that big thumb right there.
I love it. They're hilarious.
Thanks, team.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great night.